Why? Should I be?
Let me lead the way!
Lambert, it's time for me to retire.
He's just trying to impress you, so look after him.
If the first and third games in the series were developed by Ubisoft Montreal and the second one by Ubisoft Shanghai, then it follows that the fourth one was also developed by the latter. That's neither true or false. Two versions of Splinter Cell Double Agent were developed, one for the PC and newer generation consoles, PS3 and Xbox 360, and the other for PlayStation 2, GameCube and the original Xbox. The Chinese studio was responsible for the first one, and Ubisoft Montreal developed the second. I cannot, however, find any reliable information about who directed the game. You see, while Chaos Theory is regarded as the best Splinter Cell game, Double Agent wins the Weirdest of the Bunch award. Shanghai's last attempt at the Splinter Cell game was a lukewarm effort and produced a mostly uninteresting result. Could it be that new blood joined the team in the meantime and pushed the sequel in new and weird directions? Maybe. Whatever the case may be, Double Agent is a much more remarkable specimen than Pandora Tomorrow. While the two versions have some major differences when it comes to the story, the overall theme is the same. Plus, we are lucky enough that the version I am playing has a canonical story. I have promised you weird, and weird I will deliver. The game, though, starts much like all the others. Sam Fisher is back. Stealth suit, tri-goggles, his rifle and his gadgets, they are all here. He's investigating some weird activity in an Icelandic geothermal plant, and sure enough, the place is crawling with terrorists. This time, Sam is not alone. A rookie operative joins him, the stereotypical over-exuberant newbie, overly eager to show Sam Fisher that he's a big boy and can deal with the situation all on his own, and who sure enough gets himself killed. But not before the player has a chance to get accustomed to controlling the protagonist. Double Agent plays exactly like Chaos Theory. Almost all the actions are taken from the previous game, with the exception of the new winch that Sam uses to rappel up and down. The sound meter is gone, and the light meter has gone a few controversial changes of its own, but we'll tackle that subject later on. A radar that tracks enemy movement has been added, but it only works if Sam stands still. The goggles still have the same vision modes as before, but this game has these horrible scan lines running across the screen, and using it for longer than 5 seconds gives me migraines. I'm not sure who thought that viewing the world as if you're pressing your face against a CRT monitor was a good idea, but I hope they step on bubblegum the next time they leave their house. On the other hand, I hope the person that added corner takedowns got a raise. When you are pressing against a wall and a guard walks towards the edge, you can attack him and hold him as a human shield. A very welcome addition indeed. Swimming is also introduced, but only comes up a handful of times throughout the game. Anyway, long story short, Sam Fisher and the noob go in the plant, the noob dies, Sam disables a missile launch, Sam extracts. Who are these terrorists, and what did they plan to do? The game doesn't care, and usually neither. They are not important. What happens next, that's what's important.
Sam? What's going on, Lambert?
I broke the news when I pulled him out of Iceland. He didn't take it well. Nobody would, losing their own flesh and blood. And he'd never be the same again. They say if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. Well, Sam didn't die. He had nothing to lose anymore, so he took the most dangerous mission of his career. That's how he ended up in Ellsworth Penitentiary. He was treated the same as anybody else. No better, no worse. It was no midnight run, for damn sure. He didn't need much help to look like hell, not since Sarah, his daughter, was killed. You hate to see a good man fall so far.
Is that all you got? Come on!
Me, I hope this mission would let him pull himself back together. We needed him. Prison. A hell of a place to save a man's life.
Remember what we said about there not being a lot of character development in the series so far? Well, that changed with Double Agent. Sorta, kinda. While I find the cinematic to be top notch and the music accompanying it extremely moving, the game falls in the trap that Chaos Theory fell. That is, it tells us to have feelings about a character that isn't established well enough, and the player just cannot care about their demise. Sam's daughter appears in the first game and is absent for the next two. Her role in the first one was unremarkable. We don't know her as a person, hence we don't really care. We are told she is important because she is important to Sam. I'm sorry, but that's not good enough. Furthermore, the death of his daughter doesn't really change how the character behaves from now on. His nihilistic, self-destructive attitude shown in the cinematic isn't portrayed at all in the rest of the game. He remains the same badass that we know and love, although less charismatic and humorous here than in Chaos Theory. I welcome the idea of Sam Fisher's character going through some development, but the changes aren't radical enough. Max Payne is characterized by his pill and alcohol abuse as a result of losing his family. In The Last of Us, Joel is apathetic and distant after his daughter, who was also named Sarah, was murdered. What about Sam Fisher then? Nothing. He soldiers on as if nothing really happened. You could refute this criticism by claiming that Sam's inner core is so powerful that not even the death of his only family can stagger him. The fact that he does not rely on vices or bad habits is a positive and not a negative. Although I respect that, I like my heroes flawed and damaged. Despite their imperfections, both of the characters I mentioned above are redeemed in some way towards the end of the journey. Max Payne drops the alcohol, takes responsibility for his inadequacies, and vows to resolve the mess he got himself into. Joel heals out of his trauma and accepts Ellie as his own daughter. Since Sam Fisher has no inner demons, he has no character shortcoming to overcome, and thus nothing to progress to. In my eyes, that just makes him one-dimensional and weak. That's a shame, but as I've stated numerous times already, Splinter Cell games don't really care about that sort of thing. So, Sam Fisher is sent to prison. He befriends a man named Jamie Washington and helps him escape. That is the NSA's plan to get Sam undercover into JBA, short for John Brown's army. He is a double agent now, as he must earn the respect and trust of the domestic terrorist group and uncover their plans. His whole endeavor is represented by two bars, one for the NSA and the other for the JBA. The bars indicate the trust each side of the conflict have for Sam, and there are plenty of opportunities to gain or lose trust, depending on the player's actions during missions and during his off time. After one or two missions, Sam returns to the organization's compound, when a high-ranking member will assign him a unique chore to do. This includes the completion of an obstacle course and a safe-cracking tutorial, a new minigame that has been added to the game, assembling mines for an allied terrorist group which is... fucking boring. And last but not least, there's a really cool puzzle where you have to break an email's decryption. A puzzle so tough that I had to break out the pen and paper to help me solve it. These tasks are optional, but failing them will piss off your colleagues. Other than that, training in the firing range, completing the obstacle course again and doing other random chores will net you a small boost in trust. But all this pale in comparison to the terrible ethical choices that you have to make. For example, when Sam is introduced to the terrorist group, the leader of the JBA forces Sam to shoot the pilot whose helicopter the player hijacked to escape the prison. You can do one of two things. Either you shoot the innocent man and instantly gain favor with the JBA, but lose NSA trust and have trouble sleeping at night. Or intentionally miss, which means that your relationship with the NSA stays the same, but you have to work harder to appease your new friends, since you obviously suck at aiming.
Here you go. What do you want me to do with this? What do you think? Oh, decisions.
Sorry. Sorry.
There are more ethical boundaries for the player to cross in the game. In some missions, killing innocent people will anger the NSA. Furthermore, some ethical conundrums may appear to only have two ways of being solved, but some players willing to put themselves in more danger will find a third way, one that will satisfy the NSA and won't allow the JBA to be suspicious of them. Case in point, Sam Fisher is ordered to plant a bomb on a cruise ship. Once that is done and he returns to base, he can allow the bomb to go off or disrupt the signal and piss off the JBA's boss. However, if the player sneaks into the restricted areas and steals the codes to disarm the bomb from a fellow terrorist, he can use these codes instead, making it look like the sabotage was her fault and not Sam's. This is a new for the Splinter Cell franchise. With a few exceptions, the previous games did not allow for player agency when it came to the objectives. It was either do or fail. In Double Agent, the player has more control over any situation. While I do welcome this rejuvenating change of pace, I'm afraid it doesn't go very far with the concept. You see, the two bars representing Sam standing with his two employers really mean nothing. Whether JBA trust is around 10% or 90%, the game continues the same way. Same goes for the NSA. You'll still have the same tools, the same objectives, and the same people talking down to Sam. If a bar reaches 0%, it's game over instantly. Had the developers gone the extra mile with this new feature, the way the NPCs will communicate with Sam will be influenced by how much they trust him. Let's say, for example, that Sam Fisher has done everything his terrorist friends have asked of him, and they trust him completely. Will it make sense that they start allowing Sam into the restricted areas, give him better tools for the next mission, heck, even talk to him more, reveal their backstory and why they do what they do, share their mission with him so that Sam won't need to compromise himself looking for all the stuff he needs? If players fail to gain the organization's full trust, then the game will force the player to risk exposing his identity to uncover vital information. Sadly, this is not how things work in Double Agent. All you have to do is stay above 0% for the entirety of the game, something that I found to be extremely easy. The NSA liked me a lot. Once I hit 100% with them, the trust bar never went down, since I don't like triggering alarms or killing anyone, let alone innocent people. The JBA is harder to please. If they spot you sneaking around in the restricted areas, and even their personal quarters, they will order you to leave, and the bar will slowly bleed until you get out. And since they occasionally order you to commit some pretty immoral stuff, and I'm not down with that, I always made sure to keep enough trust points in reserve, just to be on the safe side. It's quite disappointing that the morality system acts like a health bar, and not like something more complex. It's definitely a step in the right direction, making a valiant attempt at progressing the franchise into new, unexplored territory. While new players are going to be hooked immediately, once they realize how the system works exactly, disappointment soon follows. It's not nearly deep or nuanced enough, and it's a damn shame. Had this system worked any better, we could have had a far more interesting game on our hands. Thankfully, Double Agent has a few more aces up its sleeve. In the first part of this video, I was praising each game individually, some more than others, on shaking things up and creating exciting diversions for the player during normal gameplay. The reason I did that is, despite them being really good video games, they can get a bit monotonous after a while. Almost every level followed a similar pattern, and there was little deviation from the main gameplay loop. I'm not going to do the same here. In Double Agent, because of the way it's set up, even seasoned Splinter Cell players cannot predict what the game is going to throw at them next. It starts out like every other game in the series, then Sam's daughter dies, and boom, now you're in a prison and nothing but a knife and you gotta break out. You are then introduced to the JBA, get to know the compound they are hiding in, but don't get too cozy, because the boss man needs you to skydive from 8,000 feet in the air and capture a supertanker in Siberia. Sure, there are missions that follow the tried and true formula, but they may be set during daytime, or in a war zone. Heck, even during your time in the terrorist HQ, the player can come across unexpected surprises. Take this for example. I'm sneaking into the only female terrorist quarters, trying to find her files and get her background information. As I'm trying to leave her room, she catches me where I'm obviously not allowed.
Sam. Oh, you're just full of surprises, aren't you?
I do my best.
You're not cleared to be up here. I'm gonna have to report this, Sam.
Mixing business and pleasure can get tricky.
You're telling me. I'll tell you what. Next time, bring flowers. This time, I'll let you slide.
But by far my most favorite moments from the game are these two levels. First, the Shanghai mission. The boss orders Sam to stay with the helicopter while he meets his terrorist allies. However, an undercover CIA agent needs a sample of the material they use to produce their nuclear bombs, so Sam is left with no choice. He jumps off a crane and rappels down the side of the skyscraper like a scene right out of Mission Impossible, makes his way into the hotel, and finally into the room where the meeting is taking place, and, get this, he needs to crack the safe just feet away from the terrorists, with only a flimsy partition in between them. The second highlight of the game takes place in the Congo. Same deal, Sam is ordered to stay back, but we all know that's not gonna happen. Sam sneaks away into the hotel and makes his way through a war zone to the very top of the building. He climbs down until he comes across the super secure meeting room, and while dodging lasers, he plants a microphone and stays in the ceiling hugging the pipe, since he has no time to leave. Once the meeting is over, Sam will need to somehow get to the parking lot first in order to not arouse any suspicion. It's moments like this that add genuine stress and urgency to situations that make the player feel like his actions have incredible weight. No other game in the series has come close to providing such nail-biting sequences, and unfortunately, telling you about this while showing you snippets of gameplay cannot recreate the experience. These are, without a doubt, the best thing about Double Agent. The plot in Double Agent, unlike its older cousins, is threadbare. As we've already covered, John Brown's army is a domestic terrorist group, and they are not very happy with the state of their country. So, the only logical solution to the problem is to detonate nuclear bombs in New York, in what I can only describe as a misguided attempt at a suicide bombing. They plan to die along with everyone in New York, for whatever reason. Okay, I get it, a lot of people live there, but wouldn't it be more devastating if they targeted Washington DC instead? If you hate your government, wouldn't it make more sense to kill the entirety of the political establishment in one fell swoop? Since Sam Fisher never gets a one-on-one with the leader of the JBA, the player is left to assume that the people he's spying on are complete and utter lunatics. Going through their personal stuff, you can uncover info about the high-ranking members of the group, information you can retrieve from the game's manual as well, but whatever. Emile Dufresne is the name of the JBA's leader, and this is his past. He was wealthy, he invested into businesses, and suddenly decided to form a terrorist group and ally himself with other similar groups from overseas because he despises the US government. The other members you will interact with are just petty career criminals with highly technical competency in their respective fields. Sure, they are criminals, but they are most definitely not terrorist material. Not only are their motives unclear and ridiculously broad, but they also lack character. None of them have any personalities that don't fall in a stereotypical cliché. This one is smart, authoritative, and commands absolute obedience. This one is dumb, and bullies everyone because he is big. This one is normal. This one is also normal, albeit a bit sociopathic in certain cases. This one is, who the hell is this guy? I swear he doesn't have a speaking role in the game. Was he cut out at the last minute? Whatever. I gave all the other games a free pass when it came to the simplicity of the villain's motivation, but Double Agent gets a slap on the wrist. You cannot have the entire game focus on a single NSA agent infiltrating and befriending a terrorist organization and not have a more robust backstory for its existence. At the very least, the writers should have given the high-ranking members more personality, give us a better reason to hate them and want to bring them down other than, they will nuke the place, oh how evil! If the plot is weak and uninteresting, then the finale is equal parts groundbreaking and nonsensical. Groundbreaking because Double Agent's conclusion to the story carries over the next game in the series, whereas all the previous games had a happy ending, with little to no time connections from one to the next. Nonsensical because, well, Irving Lambert, the voice we've all learned to love up until this point, occasionally throughout the plot will try and contact Sam while he's undercover. Instead of just planting a bug or a secret phone and talking that way, he often tends to meet Sam face to face, something that's extremely risky, as both parties agree. Well, Lambert's luck ran out in the last mission. While the JBA are getting ready to detonate their bombs, and the NSA tips off the police to conduct a raid on the terrorist stronghold, the JBA's boss calls Sam to the interrogation room. A badly beaten up Lambert is tied to a chair. They don't seem to know who he is, and Lambertina blows Sam's cover, but the task of shooting the trespasser falls onto Sam, for some reason. If the JBA doesn't suspect a thing, why get Sam Fisher specifically to kill the intruder? Couldn't they get a random henchman to do it? Whatever the case may be, Sam now has a very interesting choice to make. It's him, the third echelon boss, Jamie Washington, and a pistol with only one bullet. Do you choose to A. Shoot your ally and maintain your cover, or B. Shoot the terrorist and have the entire organization know you are a traitor?
You have 5 seconds. 5, 4.
Report in.
compound. Shoot Sam Fisher on sight.
The bomb. Stop it. Take them all out if you must. Whatever it takes.
Going with Plan A will allow you to get your guns and approach the area where the bomb is held with greater ease, and it's also the canonical ending that developers have chosen for the sequels. Choosing to instead save Lambert, the rest of the mission gets a lot trickier, but I found the challenge entertaining. Despite your choice, the rest of the mission is the same. Sam locates the undercover bunker, kills or incapacitates all the terrorists he comes across, defuses the bomb, and leaves just in time before the SWAT team arrests him as well. Depending on your trust levels with both parties, and some ethical choices you took during the campaign, you may unlock the secret bonus mission, where Sam sneaks onto a boat that carries a second bomb, waiting to be detonated just miles away from the Statue of Liberty. Was Irving Lambert a big dummy trying to meet Sam Fisher when there were other, more covert and effective means of communication? Yes. Did the ending feel forced? Sure, I guess you can say that. Is it effective? That really depends on the individual. It sure as hell is 10 times more effective than when the game kills off Sam's daughter in a cinematic, or in Chaos Theory, where you have to shoot a character you've barely interacted with. At least Irving Lambert has been there for every game so far, even though he had a different voice actor in Pandora Tomorrow, but whatever. When the game puts a pistol in your hands and demands you make a choice, this time the player is unlikely to take that choice lightly. But hey, you may think the ending is ridiculously forced, and any sane person in real life could have avoided that outcome, and I partly agree. But I will commend the development team for having the balls to shake things up in a major and meaningful way. I've been nagging for ages about there not being any character development in the series, and while that development may not have been what I was personally hoping for, hell, at least they tried. Even back in 2006, the Splinter Cell games were considered to be very samey, and Double Agent sought to fix that. Despite the mediocrity in some places, I admire and applaud their effort. I hope you like all the praise I'm giving you, Double Agent, cause now I'm taking it all back, you massive buggy abomination of a video game. God, where do I begin? Let's address the first thing you've all noticed by now. The light meter is gone and has been substituted by one light. Green means dark, yellow means light, and whenever it's blinking red, that means get ready for trouble. I have two problems with this change. For starters, I have this little thing called
Deuteranopia.
Which basically means I can't tell the difference between certain colors. Just so happens that Double Agent has picked these two specific colors, and while I can tell them apart now showing them to you guys, it's another story during gameplay when I have to pay attention to other things as well. But okay, partial color blindness is a problem that's only affecting me and a very small percentage of gamers. I'm willing to let it go. On to my second pet peeve. Have you noticed how washed out the graphics are? Especially the shadows, if you can even call them that? I promise, that's not the video render settings, that's how it looks like in game. Differentiating between light and dark is a tricky thing to do in Double Agent. The difference exists in the game's logic, it's just that what the human eye considers dark doesn't always agree with the game's definition of dark. Due to the design the developers went with, dark places don't seem all that dark in 90% of the cases, and you might easily find yourself spotted through no fault of your own. Take this instance. Now Sam is in complete and utter darkness. Now he's not. Like, what? Have you spotted a significant change in lighting? No, of course not, but the game doesn't agree with us. Sadly, there are a lot more examples like this in the game. Not only that, but Double Agent has a lot of missions that take place in broad daylight, and new for the series. Since Sam Fisher is working with the JBA, and he no longer has the luxury of choosing when to infiltrate, this new design choice makes sense. If only the AI would accommodate this bold endeavor. Unpredictable is not the word I'm looking for. The best way to describe the AI in this game is ridiculous. The number of times I've been spotted for no discernible reason is infuriatingly high. Sometimes it feels like they have eyes at the back of their skulls. Sometimes it feels like they have X-ray vision and can spot the player through a blizzard, like in the tanker level, where you can wait for a mini-storm and when visibility is low, move unhindered for the duration. The inconsistencies don't end there. In Double Agent, some guards, when responding to a disturbance, will dash towards you as if they magically know exactly where you are, bump into you and start firing. Distractions also don't work always as intended, and the reason why is beyond me.
I think I know what I can do here. Let me buy you some time. I'll hack into the slot machines in the casino. That should get the guards' attention.
Nah, mate. I don't think he cares. I really don't think he cares. The best way to sneak through an area is to carefully study the AI routine and do your very best not to break them out of it. Unless of course you want to kill everyone you meet. In the previous games, the AI was not perfect. There were always instances where the enemies would be too aware, and the more complex the technology got, the AI will break in more interesting ways. But at least these instances were few and far between. Not in this game, sadly. Loading a save file and doing the exact same thing will produce completely different results. Sometimes you remain undetected, other times you cause the enemies to become suspicious of you but don't attack you, and other times they spot you like the magical clairvoyants that they are. There's a plethora of other nuisances that give off the impression that Double Agent was undercooked, possibly rushed to meet a deadline. The biggest negative is the maximum resolution of 1600 by 1200. It's only by editing the INI file that can force the game to run in higher resolutions and hope that nothing else breaks. The UI has taken a turn for the worse, replacing the neat and tidy box that will appear in the corner when the player will approach a context-sensitive object, with big and intrusive icons in the lower middle part of the screen. The option to enter an event is also gone, and now the player needs to constantly work towards a hole, praying that the game understands what the player is trying to do. Even accessing a menu is unnecessarily complicated. Every time you log into a computer, you get this really short CGI cinematic of Sam raising his PDA to access the machine. They've even gone through the effort of creating a new video for every level in the game, even for the training level, which is a Matrix-like white room with a disembodied voice guiding the player. It does nothing to aid with immersion, not to mention that once you access the computer, time freezes and only unfreezes when you exit or when you are playing the hacking minigame. In Chaos Theory, this didn't happen. You had to pay extra attention to the environment, lest you are ambushed by a patrolling guard when you are not paying attention. In Double Agent, this layer of depth is gone, because the developers didn't feel the need to recreate a simple UI. Not only that, but emails you may come across that don't fit in a single screen will automatically scroll after a few seconds without the user being able to stop it. I mean, Pandora Tomorrow was developed by the same guys, and even then, back in 2004, they mastered the art of putting a vertical slider to scroll through text. It's not just emails, there are more stuff than I can nag about all day long. Pandora Tomorrow may have been largely uninteresting, but at least it ran well and was efficiently designed and executed. It even runs well on modern systems, albeit with a few issues regarding some light sources. How did these people manage to ruin so many simple things is a mystery. Before we wrap things up, let's talk about multiplayer. This time around, there's no co-op, and with GameSpy's death some years ago, the Spies vs Mercenaries mode died as well. Worry not, this one you can actually play against bots. Sadly, there are only mercenary bots, meaning that if you want to play, you're going to be left alone with up to 3 other enemy bots. Since the odds are stacked unfairly against you, don't expect to make any significant progress unless you are the most incompetent bots on the opposing team. The enemies are quite good at following you, responding to alerts whenever you try and access an objective, or reacting to sounds you make like a human player would. The one and only game mode asks the spies to infiltrate an area, hack the terminals, and download a complete file which they will have to extract back to their safe house. If they die before they can extract, they have to start all over again. The mercenaries will know which terminal the spy is trying to hack, so the spy can stop and resume the hack at another terminal if he feels threatened. It's an elaborate game of cats and mice, except this time around the cats have assault rifles and flashlights, and the mice have only their athletic prowess, a PDA to hack stuff and disable lights, and just one gadget that has limited uses. It's a fun distraction. Even when playing alone, you can sense the tension when a mercenary approaches you, and the sound of his heartbeat monitor gets louder and louder, as you are forced to duck inside a vent and relocate elsewhere. Maybe one day I'll get a group of people and try and play. Maybe. Ladies and gentlemen, this is it. This is the moment the fans of the series have been waiting for. This game is the one that has created a colossal rift in the fanbase. Splinter Cell Double Agent copied the formula, but shook things up quite a bit to keep the series fresh. Splinter Cell Conviction, on the other hand, took the formula, threw it out of the window and said, "Nah, none for me, thank you very much." The game that gamers got, however, was initially completely different. Conviction was supposed to be open world, with a ragged Sam Fisher evading the law, not by sticking to the shadows and using high-tech weapons, but by using crowds full of civilians as cover, remind you of anything, and utilizing mundane, everyday objects to attack or distract enemies, pretty much like a video game adaptation of The Fugitive, starring Harrison Ford. From the footage of these early builds, we can see that the game had a hand-to-hand combat system. Every item in the environment could be picked up and used as a melee weapon or tossed. Sam could barricade doors by toppling closets, etc. It may have looked good on paper, but the development team over at Ubisoft Montreal, now lacking many of its members that worked on previous titles, needed help to turn Conviction into an actual video game. This is where Maxime Belland intervenes. I was just going to come in and focus on gameplay. To be honest, after 2 days, I realized that this was not a fix-it job. It was a bigger job. There were too many design problems that were really hard. We didn't have a solution. Well, a solution was found, but it wasn't the one that will help this failed prototype blossom. Instead, Belland brought his own interpretation of the Sam Fisher character and the focus of the game changed drastically. One could argue that it's not just a different game, it's in a completely different genre as well. Conviction was no longer about a ridiculously talented spy who was now on the run and who had to utilize his ingenuity and expertise to adapt to his environment. The Sam Fisher that Belland envisioned was an action hero, capable of dispatching half a dozen enemies without blinking while looking cool in the process. This is no longer a series about careful maneuvering through shadows, trying to perform reconnaissance and intelligence gathering while leaving no traces behind. Now it's run, shoot, and the mess you leave behind? Fuck it, it's someone else's problem now. There's a lot to be said about this radical change to the franchise and how it fits with its predecessors. Of course everyone has their own opinion on this, but before I tell you my own, we need to analyze Splinter Cell Conviction, understand what it's all about, and that is going to be tricky, as we've got a lot of ground to cover. Let's take things from the top. 3 years have passed since the events in Double Agent. We found Sam in a coffee shop in Valletta, Malta, when a familiar voice from his past makes contact with him. I have never mentioned the name Anna Grimsdottir in the series of videos, as I didn't find a reason to bring it up until now. Anna worked as an analyst and all-around computer genius, helping Sam with all things technical while he was in the field. In Conviction, however, she plays a much greater role and she was redesigned to fit her new role. How she turned from this into this is not explained at all. But, since I have a thing for redheads in video games, you won't hear me complaining. Anna tells Sam that armed men are looking for him, and sure enough, chaos erupts and we are introduced to Sam's new moveset. But before that, we got a flashback. Oh yeah, flashbacks. Flash forwards, flash sideways, this game has it all. It's still a story that progresses in a linear fashion, but then again, that's not 100% true, as the events of Conviction are being narrated by a yet unknown character to the people who for some reason are detaining him. It doesn't really need to be this way. I guess it gives a game variety and a new feel, so that's why the developers chose this kind of storytelling. Back to our flashback. It's a memory of Sam, comforting his daughter who's afraid to sleep in the dark. This is, if you can actually believe it, the tutorial about stealth. Much like Double Agent, Conviction also works with a binary light-dark system. This scene could have been so special, but the game manages to ruin it so effortlessly. Sam tells his daughter that the darkness doesn't make her vulnerable, quite the opposite. Her eyes will adjust and she can see things much clearer, and she'll be invisible herself. Okay, that works as a tutorial, as it doesn't rely on plain text to convey a lesson and allows the player to draw parallels from Sam teaching this cool stuff to his daughter, and the rest of the game where you're going to use the shadows to your advantage. But what does the game do? It tells me that I'm invisible when in the dark. For fuck's sakes, game, I can put 2 and 2 together. What is the point of this scene if you're just going to tell me anyway? If you wanted to teach me how the system worked, this text will do it. But you went through the effort to create this scene. Don't cheapen it by condescendingly explain what it's all about.
Okay, here it is. When you're in the dark and your eyes get used to it, you can see all sorts of things around you really well. And then you can do stuff with them.
Like what?
Now take a look at your mobile. You can see it really well, right? If there were monsters standing underneath it, because I can see it, maybe I could make it fall on them and they'd go away.
And it would fall on their heads and they wouldn't be bad anymore?
That's...
So what are we supposed to do with these? Drag them to the back courtyard. Let someone else dump them.
Someone took out the chandelier!
Now, if I wanted to be an extra cynical prick, I'd say that the general dumbing down of the game can be represented in this scene. Sam is the development team and the player is the baby Sarah, where we are told like the brain-dead, illiterate and impatient consumers that we are how this video game works, but I'm not going to do that. While this meta-narrative is fun to think about, I will ultimately defend this sequence as it helps give Sam Fisher a more caring and loving side. For once, we see him as a dad. It's cute. We aren't told anymore that he had a daughter, we actually get to see a small part of the relationship, even through a cutscene with minimal interaction. The flashback gets interrupted for a while, and resumes to teach us another new mechanic in Conviction. When Sam kills an enemy with a hand-to-hand takedown, he gets what's called an execute. He can mark as many enemies as his current weapon permits him, and when the execute ability is available, he can kill them almost instantly with a press of a button. Sam is invincible during the process as the camera assumes a more cinematic angle and Sam headshots all the marked targets. This is what the lead gameplay designer Maxime Balin thought the Sam Fisher character was all about. It's something that you see in movies all the time. Can Sam shoot two guys in the head in a quarter of a second? Fuck yeah, it's Sam, he says during the IGN interview. I can assure you that Sam could not pull this off in previous games due to the limitations imposed by the developers who didn't want the player to be able to do this kind of thing. But okay, let's agree for the argument's sake that Sam is more than capable of pulling this stunt off. We are going to see why just because you can do something, it doesn't mean that you should do it. Conviction is not a stealth game, not a third-person shooter, nor a cover shooter, but a hybrid of the three. The player enters an area, kills everyone in his way, and proceeds to the next one where he gets to do the exact same thing. Although it is possible to sneak through an area without alerting any enemies, it's nigh on impossible in most areas. Furthermore, the game sometimes forces you into combat, so a 100% no-kill stealth playthrough is, in my understanding, impossible. The game's combat is focused on ambushing your enemies, taking cover and relocating before they pin you down. Once they lose sight of the player, a ghost is going to appear in Sam's last known position, signaling to the player that that's where the enemies are going to myopically focus their efforts. Before they try and flush you out by throwing grenades or rushing you, that's when you can sneak around and engage them again. Rinse and repeat until they are all dead. I'm going to forget about this game's ancestry and overlook its shortcomings just for a second, and say that this is actually really cool game design. Every encounter plays not like a shooter, but like a puzzle. Figuring out what the best approach to initiating a fight is, dashing to cover and then relocating to strike from somewhere else is thrilling and a ton of fun. I'll give the development team this, they actually managed to create what they sought to create in the first place. But then they ruined a large part of it by adding the mark and execute system. Its existence helps trivialize a lot of the game, and stupidly difficult encounters become child's play when the player uses the mechanic. For starters, there is no limitation on who Sam can knock down with melee attacks to activate this ability. Just approach someone from any direction you want and press a button to kill him or hold it for a little while to hold him as a shield. That's it. The enemies also cannot resist melee, except for rare occurrences where they might push you away if you charge them head on when they are already fighting you, but by then you will most likely be dead. Moreover, the system just fails in its intended purpose. The developers wanted the mark and execute to enhance the gameplay, but it ended up doing the exact opposite. Let's take Max Payne and his suit dodge mechanic for example. In those games, you have an ability that slows down time, but not the player's ability to aim and shoot, and makes Max dive towards any direction to avoid damage. It never takes control away from the player, it instead gives him some valuable seconds to do more with the tools he already has. Or for another example, take the Mass Effect games, where you could freeze time to issue simple orders to your squad mates and pick a target to use your skills on. Let's go back to Conviction, where the game takes control away from the player and does the job for him. The only input that is required of us is to position Sam somewhere where he can shoot all the marked targets, and the rest is the game's job. Let me show you a few examples in game. We are going to play the same encounter twice, one by using the mark and execute, and the other like we normally would.
You want her dead? Is that what you want?
Hold position.
I say again, you think you can hide from me?
Down,
There!
Contact in the car!
Or she dies! You want her dead? Is that what you want?
Great.
Kill her!
Roger that.
Without mark and execute, not only are the encounters far more complex, but they are also more enjoyable. You cannot compare the pressing of a single button to actually playing the game in order to overcome the challenge it presents a player. Plus, it feels way cooler when you line up all the headshots yourselves without the game helping you. Let me be absolutely honest here. I can see what they were trying to do. If they wanted Sam Fisher to be an action hero, then he should have some kind of ability to help overcome the enemies. But this is not good design, it just helps make an easy game even easier. If you do want to play Conviction, do yourself a favor and play on the highest difficulty level. The game is way too forgiving on all the others. If you want an even greater challenge, resist the urge to mark and execute targets. It's baffling that there is no option to turn this feature off, but hey, what can we do? By doing these two things you are probably going to have a better experience with the game. But then again, the increased difficulty doesn't alter much other than the damage you take from enemies. All the other things that influence how childishly easy the game is are unaffected by the difficulty level. For the first time in the series, Sam can pick up weapons from fallen enemies, and there is quite the variety on offer here. They have different stats when it comes to damage, accuracy, magazine size, and how many targets they allow the player to mark, but ultimately they fall into two categories, silenced and loud guns. Silenced guns give you an immense tactical advantage, so picking these is a no-brainer. Every pistol comes with infinite ammo. Reloading pistols is a ridiculously quick affair, so even though pistols have magazines of varying capacity, ammo conservation doesn't really matter. Long guns have limited ammunition, but you can easily collect more from enemies, and running out of bullets is extremely unlikely. I hardly use them anyway, since after the first 3 shots, the accuracy goes all over the place. You can upgrade all the guns in the game by using PEC currency. You get these points by completing really mundane challenges, and you can buy laser pointers, sights, and even silencers for some weapons to add accuracy, increase the number of marks, and give yourself some aim assist when zooming in close to an enemy's head. Yeah, if the limited ammunition is not your thing, the game will aim for you, no worries. But if you still feel slightly underpowered, forget about aiming and shooting, just spam grenades and trivialize every combat encounter. Whether it be frag grenades, remote or proximity mines, if there's a doorway that you know a bunch of enemies are going to pour out from, a couple of grenades are going to completely ruin a possibly interesting and challenging fight. Like this scene for example, it's a great arena for a shootout, but then I do this. Problem solved. If you only get a set amount of grenades, then yeah, there wouldn't be a problem. But you can replenish every grenade type from weapon caches you find in the levels, and these aren't all that hard to come by. Had the game been tweaked a bit more, it would feel like it wasn't set too easy for the entirety of its duration. Give the player the ability to switch off the mark and execute mechanic, make the pistols have limited ammo as well, so that the player will need to mix shooting and hand-to-hand combat to get rid of all the enemies. Give the player less grenades and minimize his ability to restock. If these recommendations made it into the game before release, people wouldn't have been so negative. The developers already killed what the fans loved about the series, at least give them something better to play. I'm not going to judge Conviction by comparing it to the older games. I haven't even given my final opinion on it yet, as I feel it's in a league of its own and it deserves to be critiqued as such. So, taking everything else out of the picture, I have got to say that Splinter Cell Conviction is a mediocre action game. It's way too easy, and it gives the players all the tools they need to make an easy game even easier. I'm getting a bit too negative, so let's take a break. Let's go back to talking about the story. So, why is Sam in Malta and why are thugs chasing him? He's looking for a gang leader named Andrei Kobin, and it turns out it was him that killed Sarah. So Sam goes to his mansion, kills everyone, and gets a one-on-one with Kobin to see what he's got to say on the matter. This is a great opportunity to talk about the new interrogation mechanic, where Sam will grab his victim and start asking questions, and when he's not receiving answers, he'll beat him to a pulp. The cool thing is that you can see different animations playing depending on which object Sam is near, and some of these attacks are pretty brutal. There is no skill to this, you can literally just stand there, press the button until the sequence is over, and the result will always be the same. These sequences aren't all that nuanced or well thought out. It's basically, tell me this, no I won't! Okay, here's a basic answer, or my unwillingness to say anything of any import whatsoever a couple of times until the sequence is over. It sure as hell beats sitting idly watching an in-game cutscene. Anyway, while Sam is torturing Corbin, third echelon agents ambush him and try and arrest him. Anna tells Sam to go with them, which he does unwillingly, hoping he'll get to the bottom of what's going down. They fly Sam's unconscious body to Washington DC, where he is strapped to a gurney, waiting to be interrogated himself. Anna will save him just in time and lays the foundation of what conviction is all about. The third echelon's director, Tom Reed, has a plan to kill the President of the United States. Anna is a double agent who has Reed's total trust, but is loyal to the President. Sam, as it conveniently turns out, is there to save the day yet again. Sam really isn't interested in what's going on, so Anna throws the bait.
What do you know about her?
I know she's alive. How's that for starters?
You're lying. She's dead. Lambert told me she was dead, and I take his word over yours.
She's alive, Sam, and I know where she is. I've known all along.
Hearing that, Sam is on board. He goes chasing around Reed and his mercenary evildoers, uncovers their plans to use EMPs to cover their attack on the White House, and in the process of saving the President, he kills everyone he meets. Meanwhile, he asks for help from an old buddy of his, Victor Cost. He is the man who is narrating all the events in the game during the cinematics. They could have given us some narration or basic dialogue to tell us who he is, but the developers chose to introduce Cost during a flashback from when he and Sam Fisher were fighting in Iraq during Desert Storm. Their squad is ambushed and Sam needs to go and save Cost, but hey, it turns out that Sam needs rescuing and you've been playing as Cost all along. The twist isn't all that impressive, but ultimately I appreciate the fact that the team went to extra lengths to create assets you're only going to see in one level to introduce the character. Immediately after that flashback, Sam will try and meet up with Cost, and to avoid any eavesdroppers, they choose a public place to use as cover. It's in this level that you can clearly see Conviction's original DNA shining through the cracks. The original design of the game was supposed to be just that, the player sneaking through crowds to get to where he wants. But in this sequence, Sam needs to stay hidden and take out the people tailing him. Okay, cool. Time for something unique. An opportunity to hide in the crowds. Oh, never mind. The game marks the bad guys for you. Well, I kinda understand the reasoning behind this. It's pretty hard to hide in crowds consisting of about 3 people. I swear, I've seen funerals more popular than this fair. It's painfully evident that the engine cannot handle a lot of NPCs, but then again, the first Malta levels had more NPCs packed together in a believable setting. The engine disposed of them when Sam would leave the area to save on memory, but because this level is large and the civilians cannot leave, the developers sprinkled as many as they could get away with all over the place, but the end result is laughable. Other than the level in the world's least popular fair, every level is more or less the same. The levels don't really succeed in standing out too much from one another, them being set in the same city and whatnot. The level design is pretty good at accommodating Sam's new moveset, and areas provide plenty of cover and other obstacles which Sam can use to get the drop on his enemies. That being said, there are some memorable levels in the game, but not because of gameplay reasons. The ones I'm going to talk about advance the plot, or contain character development, something that was sorely lacking in the majority of the Splinter Cell games. We've already talked about the fair, which is just a glorified briefing, and the Iraq flashback which introduced Victor Cost's loyalty to Sam, so let's start with the raid on 3rd Echelon's headquarters. This one is unique because at the very beginning it has a stealth limitation, one alarm and it's back to the checkpoint. Thankfully, that particular sequence only lasts for about 5 minutes, and it's not really that awful. But then we get to the end of the level where Sam is looking around for answers in Anna's office. Sam already knows that his daughter is alive and Anna is keeping her. What happens next is really a first for the Splinter Cell franchise. We'll talk again in a few minutes.
So tell me about Sarah, Grim. Tell me why you lied to me.
It was Lambert's call, Sam. He thought he was protecting you. He had a recording system set up in his office. Everything that went on in there he saved. Before New York, he gave me the access codes. The files can only be triggered on-site and only by me. This is what he had to say about Sarah.
Sarah Fisher, I'd received reliable intelligence of a credible threat against her, one coming from a mole inside Third Echelon. The threat against Sarah would be used in an attempt to leverage Sam. Sam would then be compromised, and I couldn't allow that. So I made the hard choice. I faked Sarah's death, taking her off the playing board. Without her, Sam would be free to act as he needed to. He'd suffer, but she'd be safe. The rest was detailed. Preparing a new identity for Sarah, securing her. Excellent work there, Anna, in keeping her hidden. Then used that despicable creature, Coven, to provide a body that could stand in for the girl. And then I lied to my best friend. Told him his daughter was dead. Took advantage of his grief and used it for Third Echelon's purposes. And the saddest part of this, I never uncovered the mole. The danger to her and to Sam is still out there, which means this has to stay hidden. You and I know, that's all. Perhaps someday...
Sam! Sam! Sam, listen to me! Sam! You have to listen to me. What's done is done. But right now, I need you. I need the Sam Fisher I worked with.
Haven't you heard? He's dead! Just ask my daughter.
Sam, please! My analysts have worked through the rest of the data that you got from White Box. We know what they're doing, and we can't stop it.
Then what do you need me for?
They've got 3 directional EMP generators in place. When they go off, the pulses will blanket the entire metro area. Optimal coverage pattern predictions place one of those 3 at the Old City Reservoir site. You need to go there and disable it.
Why should I?
Because that's the one that will hit Sarah's apartment. And if you stop it, you can save her from what's coming after.
And the other 2?
There's only time to go after one. So go. Save your daughter. I was never holding her. That was just a bluff to get you in the game. And for whatever it's worth, I'm sorry.
What about you?
I'm going to the White House with Tom Reed, and I'm going to try to save the president. Maybe I'll see you there.
Not only was this red herring established to set up the events for Double Agent, but the conspiracy was exposed so that Sam would have a legitimate reason to do what he does in Conviction. That's some good stuff if you ask me, even if the cliché of the loved one coming back from the dead because the protagonist was fooled isn't really groundbreaking. It helps keep the games in the series tied together, with the subplot spanning across 2 games. Furthermore, the direction and the text, which you have already noticed by now in other clips, help sell the scene, so let's talk about these. The presentation is leagues above the previous games, especially the pre-render cinematics. They tried to do something really cool with them. When a level ends, the camera pans to one side so that a seamless transition between gameplay and cinematic can happen, and then vice versa. The effect falls flat on his face though, as the cinematics, even years after I first played the game, even on upgraded hardware, can never load fast enough. Not to mention that all the cutscenes have been pre-rendered to a horrendous quality level. While the technical aspect leaves a lot to be desired, the cutscenes still manage to maintain continuity, to indirectly communicate to the player that Sam was here, now he's going there. The older games had great difficulty in conveying that. Sam will change countries and continents with nothing but a written briefing to explain the change in scenery, and the transition for the players was quite jarring. It helps that the cinematics are narrated as well, even though the commentary isn't all that useful. Vic Cost constantly telling us that Sam was pissed off that something that happened to him isn't something we couldn't figure out ourselves. The in-game cutscenes, like the one we just watched, are far better than the cinematics. You might recognize the directing style if you played Metal Gear Solid 5. The camera has just the right amount of wobbling to imitate a human operating a handheld device without it being nauseating. The digital cameraman also likes to move about the place, zooming into people when appropriate and generally doing stuff you cannot pull off in the real world. There aren't any cuts either, which I personally find to be a really cool style, and it also helps make the transition between cutscene and gameplay almost perfectly seamless. The text being portrayed on the walls is another cool addition, and is mostly reserved for giving the player their objectives, but it's awesome how the text is used to mark entrances to areas or on the objectives themselves. In rare instances, videos and pictures of important characters are projected, and in sequences that advance the plot, Sam's emotional reaction is spelled out for us, something I found to be a bit silly. Words like hope, anger, compromise, etc. do nothing to instill the same emotions on me. That's someone else's job. Like, say, the direction of a scene, which Conviction pulls off amazingly well. Let's bring this segment to a close and talk about the last noteworthy level of the game. Unfortunately, it's not the one where Sam finally reconnects with his daughter. Honestly, it feels really forced as the developers could not come up with another, more convenient opportunity for the two to meet. I guess it would feel lazy if they had met after the end of the game, that's why they tried to shoehorn the scene somewhere in the middle. This happens right after the third echelon level, when Anna tells Sam where one of the EMPs is. Since Sam has no way of destroying the generators powering the device, Vic Ost, who in the meantime has taken Sarah from her apartment, flies with his Deus Ex Machina helicopter and fires missiles at the generators and the bad guy's helicopter that's so inept at killing Sam. The EMP is destroyed, he lands for a while to pick up Sam embraces Sarah after so long, but then is back up on the helicopter to witness the other EMPs go off and they are shot down. When they come to, they remember that Sam has some terrorists to kill. This is not what I was waiting for the entire game, but I'll stop pretending I give a damn about this subplot. The final level of the White House is instead more interesting as more stuff about the plot will be revealed. Before the big confrontation with the arch-villain, Sam will meet Anna, who then proceeds to shoot him and capture him. This has been teased a couple of times during flash-forwards throughout the campaign, but it's later revealed that Anna didn't actually double-cross Sam, but only pretended to have captured him as a means to get close to Tom Reed. Let's summarize the plot. Sam Fisher is snooping around in Malta looking for a guy who knows details about his daughter's accident. Third Echelon will abduct him and transport him to Washington DC because they suspect Sam knows stuff about their plot. Anna frees Sam since he is the only one who can help her take down Reed and his buddies, and as a bonus, Sam will get to meet his daughter again. Our heroes discover the need for the electromagnetic pulse devices. They will be used to paralyze the entire city, and during the mayhem, Tom Reed will assassinate President slightly taller Hillary Clinton. As you can see, a sinister and powerful organization called Megiddo wants President slightly taller Hillary Clinton out of the picture because they can't buy her off. That's why she will die, and the vice president, who is on Megiddo's payroll, will take the reins of the country after the attack. Sam and Anna will take out Tom Reed and save the president just in time, but we never get to learn who Megiddo is. Sam Fisher also comes to the realization that the mole Lambert was looking for was indeed Reed, with Sam finally identifying who is ultimately responsible for his suffering. The player gets to decide whether Reed lives or dies, but it really doesn't matter. If you choose to spare his life, Anna will finish the job for us. Even though we never learn who the true masterminds behind the conspiracy are, there is closure, with Sam's last word indicating that he is done with this line of work. There is a final scene where Vic Ost wraps up the story that he was narrating this whole time, when an explosion can be heard. Presumably it's Sam Fisher rescuing his body, but we can't be 100% sure. Le fin. The cliché of the American terrorist reaches its crescendo in Conviction. It is a serviceable plot, but it doesn't feel like the good old spy stories of the previous games, but a lot like your typical summer action blockbuster movie, mainly because of its smaller scale. The stakes, however, feel tremendous, as the main protagonist not only saves his country, but is reunited with his only family, which he thought was long gone. While the plot may be just okay, there are some errors with the plot and the setting, some more obscure than others, that really lag me. Since the original development team is long gone, one would suspect that the writers have also departed, and a quick search through some wikis confirmed my suspicion. I don't think Tom Clancy was interested with the franchise anymore, and the new writing staff doesn't seem to handle the already existing lore with the care it deserves. I have avoided discussing the plots of the previous games when it comes to their plausibility, and I wouldn't even try to find plot holes because they are so expansive and detailed that it's easy for me to miss a tiny detail and unjustly criticize something that shouldn't be criticized. Since Conviction is a much simpler tale, I'd like to take this opportunity and expose some pretty glaring issues with the story. If you watched the first part of the video or already call yourself a fan of the series, I would like you to do something for me. Explain to me what Third Echelon is. Take some time to think, it's really important. If your answer is something like, well, guy with no name, Third Echelon is a top secret NSA division which employs Splinter Cells to conduct confidential spy missions overseas as a means of gathering intelligence, you are spot on. If you added the fact that Third Echelon really doesn't exist outside the tiny circle where only a handful of people know of it, and the United States government will deny its existence should an agent be compromised, I'm giving you a golden star. Let's talk about the raid on Third Echelon HQ once more. Here we see a beautiful lobby, breathtaking architecture, really nice. Oh, look, they have a statue there. The name Third Echelon is everywhere and, I'm sorry, but what in the actual fuck? Third Echelon, a top secret NSA division, has its own dedicated building now? I'm sorry, but if your super clandestine spy organization can be detected from Google Maps, you have failed in life. Okay, since the original Splinter Cell game where Sam Fisher was the only operative, the program has expanded somewhat, and the division having its own dedicated space isn't weird at all, but they are trying to keep it a secret so that the president can have plausible deniability if the country gets compromised. Wouldn't it make sense if Third Echelon was hidden inside an NSA building? But since its existence is no secret in the world of Conviction, how come no politicians from other countries ask slightly taller Hillary Clinton what Third Echelon is? Oh, it's just part of an organization that we use to spy and eliminate anyone we don't like, no biggie.
Over at Black Arrow. Now that's a breaking pattern for them. They don't do corporate security. And based on what you told me about them...
There might be a connection.
Bingo. It's slim, but you've gone Fifth Freedom based on less.
Yo, hold up. How does Vic Cost know what Fifth Freedom is? Actually, come to think of it, how does Vic Cost know what Sam Fisher wants when he asks for help? Normally, nobody, not even his own daughter, knows what Sam's real job is. There is even a cinematic in Chaos Theory, where Douglas Shetland, a character that has known Sam for many years, has no clue why Sam is asking him about an employee of his, and quite comedically asks if Sam wants a job at his company. Cost should by all means suspect that Sam Fisher is involved in some top secret stuff, but this line tells us that he knows exactly what Sam has done in the past. Did Sam Fisher compromise Third Echelon's integrity by talking to a civilian about his previous operations? Sam Fisher may be able to resist interrogation, but we are not given a reason as to why Cost will be able to keep such a secret in the scenario that someone will be interested to know what Sam is up to. And hey, turns out that someone is indeed interrogating him. Well, that's inconvenient. The only reasonable conclusion is that Sam Fisher did talk about stuff that he should never talk about and jeopardize his entire country. That's not the Sam Fisher I know. The guy has stated numerous times that he is not in it for the money or the glory. He shuts up about Third Echelon stuff because the secrets he knows will have devastating consequences if they were ever revealed. But Conviction allows me to assume that Sam gloats to his friend about his adventures. No game, fuck off with this bullshit. Now, we know Vic Cost is the president of a security company, and it's not surprising to see that he has access to weapons and equipment. But a civilian helicopter armed with missiles? Yeah, no.
We're on our way. Just gonna take a while. Gotta make sure our flight path is in the EMP clear zone until the pulse hits.
Oh my God.
Jesus. Those things are supposed to be clean.
All those people down there who don't know what happened.
Reed, what the hell did you just do?
Missile! Inbound!
Sarah, hang on.
I didn't think they'd have air defenses set up around the White House. I was wrong.
Not only does the White House has anti-air missiles, the missiles can be launched from a platform that doesn't run on electricity. That would be silly, wouldn't it? The EMPs have fried every electronic device in the city, but the missile battery is just fine from the looks of it. Honestly, I think I will stop here, because if I try and look for more discrepancies, I think I will flip a table or something. Sadly, I cannot give you my impressions on the co-op campaign either, because, well, I don't think anyone cares about that anymore. It's a prequel to the events of the main game, and there aren't all that many interesting things about it. Except for the finale. You can look it up for yourselves if you don't mind getting spoiled, but it really pains me that I can't talk about it. Besides co-op, there is a single-player arcade version of the co-op maps where you can kill NPCs to progress to the next area. There is no spies versus mercenaries this time around, but there is an adversarial mode where it's basically spy versus environment, in which you get points by killing the enemy bots and the enemy spy. This segment is the longest in this video, and it's about to become even larger, as I am not done talking about this game just yet. You can feel why the fans of the series got so pissed off at Conviction. It has changed how everything works, and I discussed most of these changes, except one. The hero himself, Sam Fisher, has gone through a lot of changes in his design to better fit the game. We'll start with the most prominent one, his stance while using pistols, as can be seen during the cutscenes and from promotional material of the game. Many people falsely identify this as the gangsta way of holding a gun, but it couldn't be farther from the truth. The stance is called Center Axis Relock, or CAR for short. It was developed by Paul Castle, and if you want to learn more about him, you won't find much. Typing his name into the YouTube search will land you on a pilot for a reality show about Castle training American police officers. The show never aired because, in my knowledge, Castle was going through some nasty health problems and he did pass away in 2011. And it's a damn shame too. Paul Castle's approach to armed suspect was shoot first, ask questions later, and it will be amazing to see this kind of controversial training be popularized, especially today when the political tensions in the US are so high.
Stand right here, and I'm going to rob him. Alright? So I want you to stand right there, and I want you to give me an armed challenge. I want you to challenge me. Give me your money.
Drop your weapon.
I didn't hear him pull the trigger. Let's go against policy. Let's have your finger on the trigger, cock the weapon back on single action, alright? And I want you to give me a challenge. Give me your money.
Drop the weapon.
Where do you want me to put it? That was a good challenge. Alright? That's what we call a police challenge. And I'm going to tell you why that was the correct thing to do.
But anyway, I digress. You can watch these videos yourselves, I have linked them all in the description, but essentially the CAR system is designed around mobility and speed in close combat situations. People who have trained with this system swear by it. Others call it absolute trust, or, at very best, situationally useful. How accurate can you be while aiming with CAR? That depends on who you ask. Some people claim that the creator of CAR was able to be both incredibly accurate and fast in this stance, but for the sake of the argument, I will assume that while using CAR you sacrifice accuracy for speed during engagements. With that said, how is this technique portrayed in the game? Well, pretty accurately I have to say. Sam can ready his gun at the appropriate stance in just a few frames, and the shooting and reloading speed with all the pistols is really fast. Accuracy is another matter entirely. Even though you can have a laser sight on your pistol, that's mostly just for show and it doesn't indicate where each shot will go. There is an arbitrary distance at which the first shot will always land where you aim. For example, when you are trying to pull off a headshot, the crosshairs will turn red to indicate this. From longer ranges, accurate shots are not guaranteed. If you want to follow up with more shots, the accuracy goes all over the place and even more so when you are walking and aiming at the same time. If you miss a headshot, then the next best strategy is to fire some body shots in quick succession to get the job done, but even in close distances, this rarely works as intended. That is my biggest gripe with Sam's shooting ability in this game. In the previous Splinter Cell games, rapid fire was almost impossible because it was the designer's intention to discourage this kind of gameplay you see in Conviction. However, this time around, this wild inaccuracy is not welcome, especially since the whole point is to shoot as many people as possible. If your first shot misses, then the enemy had better be directly in front of your barrel, otherwise you aren't going to accomplish anything. In later stages, enemies have more health, which means that going for headshots is almost always the only viable way to play the game. I am not asking for pinpoint precision at all times. It feels, however, like a man with Sam's ability and experience will handle firearms a lot better than this. It's not just Sam's shooting. His whole moveset has been altered to fit the new playstyle. Everything from his run, his vaults, his climbing and shimming is now way faster than ever before. Here it is in the original Splinter Cell, here in Chaos Theory, and finally Conviction. Now, mind you, Sam Fisher was born in 1957, and the events in Conviction take place in 2011. Sam is 54 years old. I'm not arguing that a middle-aged man cannot be an action hero. I mean, take a look at Keanu Reeves in John Wick, he's absolutely killing it. But generally speaking, people tend to become slower with age, not the opposite. For players finishing Double Agent and then booting up Conviction, the changes in how the protagonist moves are staggering, to say the least. Now, the novels and the comic book spin-offs to the video games have already established that Sam Fisher is well versed in a wide variety of techniques. This is the first time in the series we witness Sam using his Krav Maga skills for hand-to-hand attacks, basic parkour to climb walls, and the car system which we already discussed. Even though I do not believe that games should require the player to consume other related media to get the entire picture, I will accept that all these skills are not retcon. It's just that the technical limitations that existed ages ago could not allow the developers to fully flesh out the character in all his glory. But what the developers ended up with is odd. It's the same character, he's got a lot of baggage from his previous adventures, and now he's got a foul mood. He uses these sarcastic quips every now and then when conversing with his allies, but they fail in making me like Sam. I'm not sure what it is exactly, maybe it's just the fact that everyone keeps reminding me of the importance of the situation and the necessity to kill everything with a heartbeat in order to accomplish things. The worst thing about his character is his tendency to spout some witty one-liners every once in a while. "And now for my next trick," says Sam seconds after crushing someone's windpipe with the barrel of his rifle, completely trivializing the gravity of the situation. Morality used to mean something for the series, and I took it one step further. Almost every time I wanted to pull the trigger, I contemplated whether that was the morally okay thing to do. In Conviction, you mostly go up against gangsters and mercenaries, and you can argue that their lives are easy to take from a moral standpoint. But when Sam fights third echelon personnel, and even other Splinter Cells, the character doesn't even stop to ask if taking these lives is something he's comfortable doing. We know that the director of the agency is corrupt, but his subordinates may be clueless. Had they known that their orders go against the wishes of the president, they might be convinced to join Sam Fisher in the fight against Reed. Since that cannot happen, the game doesn't even ask the morality question. But then again, we already know that Conviction isn't a smart game, so all this nagging is futile. Right, let's put a stop to this. Some of you are wishing for me now to condemn the game as heretical, unworthy of its name, a stain in the lineage of the series. To these people I have to say, I'm going to disappoint you a little bit. I may lose a lot of you by saying that I appreciate the effort Ubisoft Montreal put into the game. They tried to create something new, they tried to innovate, and despite the end result, they deserve some leeway when it comes to this. People criticize the Call of Duty franchise because every game looks identical to the previous one. It will be hypocritical to assume that that will never happen if we got a new Chaos Theory clone every other year. That being said, however, I will now appease the torch-wielding crowds calling for my head by saying that the end result is both a mediocre action game and a bad representation of the already established canonical material. The game is far too easy and forgiving, the plot is okay, but there's some pretty glaring faults with it, the levers are mostly uninteresting, the protagonist is way less charismatic and cartoonishly overpowered for him to be believable, and depending on the gauge on your nitpickometer, the list can go on and on and on. I'll stop right here by concluding this segment with this. Splinter Cell Conviction is a mediocre action game, but it sure as hell sucks as a Splinter Cell game. Splinter Cell Conviction ended on a sober note. Sam Fisher is officially out of the game. A sequel needed to be created though, and that cannot happen without our protagonist. Who we can do without, however, is Michael Ironside, the man who has voiced Sam Fisher throughout the series. The reason behind this change in cast is the same with David Hayter not being Big Boss in Metal Gear Solid 5. The developers don't want voice actors, they want, well, actors. People who will lend their voice, their face and their body for motion capture to get the most authentic feel out of the character. Or some bullshit like that. I do not claim to know exactly what happened behind the scenes, but what I do know is that Ironside's replacement has caused a great deal of uproar from the community, and rightfully so. I don't think I need to explain why Michael Ironside was, is, and always will be the true voice of Sam Fisher. I believe I have illustrated this point a handful of times during this video. The new Sam Fisher goes by the name of Eric Johnson. This guy, not this guy. I cannot comment on this guy's performance just yet. I'll make it abundantly clear that I do not really care for him, but I will go on a small tangent here and claim that it's not really the actor's fault. We've all seen movies that feature ridiculously talented actors and their performances suck. It's not that the actor suddenly forgot how to act, a lot of the responsibility falls on the director and the writers as well. If we will cast Robert De Niro in Tommy Wiseau's The Room, will the film be any better? No, of course not. Michael Ironside's performance as Sam Fisher goes up and down in quality throughout the series. I personally find the original game and Chaos Theory to have the best portrayals of Sam Fisher. That's why I showcase some of his witty dialogue when examining those particular games. But in Double Agent, for example, the writers didn't give Sam a lot of meaningful or funny things to say. That's why Ironside's performance could not shine. In Splinter Cell Blacklist, Eric Johnson does a great job with the motion capture, and his voice isn't half bad. But the script, which we will discuss in greater detail in a few minutes, does not give the actor a chance to prove himself. Not that he ever stood a chance in replacing the legendary Michael Ironside. Just do what I did, pretend that the series ended with Splinter Cell Conviction, and now you're playing a new game that was accidentally named Splinter Cell. Sam Fisher is back at it again, this time working alongside his old buddy Victor Cost, cooperating with the US military on some operations, or something like that. It really doesn't matter, as the game doesn't waste any time.
Anything else, Chief?
Let Sarah know I'll be offline for a few days.
Sarah, she's still single, right? I'm gonna take that as a no.
Shortly after the pair leaves a military base, they witness a terrorist attack, and while investigating, Victor Cost is grievously wounded. Turns out a new terrorist organization called the Engineers are behind the attack. They released a viral video on the internet, detailing their goals and motivations. Basically, the Engineers will conduct terrorist attacks on American soil every 7 days, and will only stop once the US government withdraws its troops stationed overseas. We all know that's never gonna happen, so President slightly taller Hillary Clinton will recruit Sam Fisher to neutralize the Engineers. The new team, appropriately named 4th Echelon, operates from within an enormous plane that serves as a mobile base. Sam Fisher is the commander, and is accompanied by Charlie Cole, an employee of Victor Cost and a talented hacker and technician, Isaac Briggs, who is with the CIA, and our favorite redhead femme fatale, Anna Grimm's daughter, who Sam is not happy to see, given their relationship in the previous game. Blacklist is much like the original games when it comes to the story. It returns to the good old globetrotting formula, with missions taking place in the USA, South America, and the Middle East. The most notable of these is a daring mission in which Sam Fisher is transported into Guantanamo Bay, and a mission in which Sam coerces an Iranian general to let him into the Quds Force HQ, which is itself an ex-US embassy. They nailed the exterior look, even down to the anti-American propaganda. The game, however, has managed to lose a lot of its charm. The change in cast has a lot to do with this. Anna's voice has also changed for this game. Everything, from the overall tone of the game to the direction of the cutscenes, is new. This change is highlighted during the mission briefing cutscenes. It doesn't feel like Splinter Cell, it feels like an episode of 24. Every scene starts a bit slow and begins wrapping up as the team are discussing the plan, but when they argue, and they tend to do that a lot, everyone starts speaking really fast, throwing spy and military jargon left or right, with Sam Fisher constantly having the exact same slightly annoyed, overly serious facial expression. When someone will ultimately call him crazy or quick to judge, Sam will act like he has the solution to everything. And when stuff goes horribly wrong, he keeps pretending like the outcome was inevitable and continues acting like an all-knowing jackass. So basically, it's 24 with a little bit of House MD thrown in for good measure.
You got something to say it. Okay. Grim was right. You made a bad call. Fast and loose cowboy shit, now we've got to clean it up.
Hey, whoa, didn't we just clear Iran?
Doesn't matter if the intel's legit. Nuri running his mouth could have the US staring down the barrel of a war with the wrong enemy.
Exactly. Who's the one person who'd want that?
Sadiq. Maybe he's pulling Nuri's string.
Why, because Sam's got a hunch?
There's no way to find out. We screwed the agency in Benghazi and Chicago, so they've locked us out on this.
That's right. You burned every intelligence contact you've got.
I still have you.
What's that supposed to mean?
I need you to sync up with Grim and Charlie.
How's Charlie gonna help me?
He's not. You're gonna help him.
We're breaking in.
Break in? To Gitmo?
Charlie's gonna need to run down a security protocol so he can plant clearances in their system.
It's not that easy. You'll need paperwork, key cards.
Piece of cake, I can dummy those up.
This is insane.
Not for us.
Every major character in the cast either has no personality or is one-dimensional, and they are all incredibly uninteresting. Sam Fisher's dark sense of humor is missing, and the character has no other descriptive quality other than action hero who solves problems and is really good at what he does, always. Anna Grimm's daughter was not very happy to learn that she needed to cooperate with Fisher once more, but they both maturely decide early on to ignore the past so that they can focus on the mission. This tension between them never resurfaces again. You would think that a talented writer will make these two characters fight more often, especially as everything around them falls apart, but no. This entire subplot was created and concluded in 20 seconds, max. Don't get me wrong, they do argue from time to time, but it never feels personal. Cole is a young and energetic geek who doesn't really grasp the severity of the situation and is only trying to get Fisher-senpai to notice him. But everyone keeps treating him like shit and Cole finally matures, and that's when Fisher-senpai gives him a metaphorical pat on the back for a job well done. Briggs also gets scolded by Sam for messing things up after a mission, and he acts all grumpy until Sam forgives him. Andrei Kobin, human garbage extraordinaire, makes a return for Blacklist and mostly serves as comic relief.
Thank you. Thank you. Who are you? CIA? Oh, you have got to be fucking shitting me!
So much for meaningful character arcs. Once again, we have a Splinter Cell game that is not carried by its protagonists, but by the plot. Speaking of which, this one is particularly odd. Remember Megiddo, the shadowy organization that was ultimately behind the events of Splinter Cell Conviction? This story has nothing to do with them. At least as far as we know. The main villain goes by the name of Majid Sadiq, an ex-MI6 agent with an appropriately evil British accent. Hunting him during the game is really cool and fun, since the journey takes you across the globe and the final confrontation with him is handled really well. This is the only Splinter Cell game that has an actual final boss fight. Sadiq in the end reveals, however, that 12 nations stand behind the engineers, prompting Sam to arrest him. Then the game just ends. Maybe it's just me, but the ending feels incomplete and not like sequel bait like the developers probably wanted. I don't have a lot to comment on it, to be honest with you. It is, like many of its predecessors, inoffensive, serviceable, and just okay. What has taken a turn for the better, on the other hand, is the gameplay. If you were hoping for a return to the past, to the good old days of sneaking about slowly, I'm afraid Blacklist won't satisfy you. The gameplay resembles that of Conviction, but has evolved and has reached a stage where it actually feels like a video game with challenging gameplay. For starters, the infinite ammo for the pistols is gone, which means that if you are careless and run into combat, you run the risk of not having enough bullets to survive. Since the AI is really competent in flushing you out of cover or rushing you, open combat is no longer viable, especially on the higher difficulty levels. Not only do they influence enemy damage, but also their awareness, the player's ability to restock on ammo and gadgets during missions, and even whether you have access to the mark and execute ability. The latter has been significantly nerfed in Blacklist. It's nowhere near as effective as in Conviction. You get 3 marks irregardless of your weapon, and to activate it, you need to fill up some bleeps either by shooting enemies or taking them down using your fancy melee combat skills. You need to be much closer to your marks to shoot them, and then again, you might not be able to kill them outright. There's a bigger enemy variety this time around. Guard dogs can sniff you out, chase you and start gnawing at your wrist, but are easy to distract with noises. Normal guards come with a variety of guns, but most importantly, they might be equipped with helmets or gas masks, which means that headshots or tear gas grenades won't be as effective as you will be hoping they'd be. Snipers can be identified by their laser sights and they can spot you through darkness if you don't take cover. Large and mean heavy armored opponents cannot be dealt with easily. You can either perform a takedown only from behind or above them, or waste precious ammunition to eliminate them. Drone operators control tiny tanks rigged with explosives and can also jam your goggles. It's really no big deal, night vision sucks in this game anyway. I mean, look at this. Double Agent had a similar problem, you can't really see anything with them on. Whatever, night vision is so 2001. Sonar goggles, like the ones from Splinter Cell Conviction, are all the rage nowadays, but these drone operators can disable your ability to spot enemies through walls unless you take them out. Sam Fisher's moveset is largely the same, albeit with a few minor changes. Honestly, the default control scheme is absolutely atrocious, especially when I played Blacklist right after I got accustomed to Conviction's controls. If my actions feel a bit weird in some of these clips, it may be because I could never remember the hand-to-hand takedown button before I changed the controls to better fit Conviction's default scheme. When I got over that hurdle, the game became much more enjoyable. Sam now has 3 different speeds at which he can move. Obviously, crouch walking is the most silent, but it's also slow. When I opted for the crouch run early on instead, I was surprised to find that enemies react to sound a lot more in this game. Sprinting has been added to the game, allowing you to close gaps with greater speed, and sometimes you might find that rushing towards an enemy to punch them in their face is a viable strategy, especially since enemies can alert their bodies to a disturbance. Sam's new karambit knife allows him to perform deadly attacks, and with a return of corner takedowns and whistling, it can lead to some pretty brutal situations. The player can also choose non-lethal means to eliminate enemies, either with punches and chokes, or with Sam's new taser gun, proximity mines that shock enemies, or with sleeping gas grenades. Bodies can be moved around and hidden in dumpsters, and unconscious enemies can be revived by their friends. But since the progression through most levels is linear, I rarely found a reason to hide bodies. Unlike Conviction, you can ghost your way through 90, maybe 95% of Blacklist. The game still forces you into combat or segments where stealth is mandatory, especially towards the end, but these moments are few and far between. The game agrees with me that a non-lethal, silent playstyle is much harder than all the others, and it's the one that grants you a bigger score. You get points according to the way you choose to deal with enemies, and then these are counted at the end of the mission to give you a score you can brag to your friends about. Non-lethal takedowns and avoiding enemies altogether gives you ghost points. Silently killing enemies grants you Panther points, and eliminating people in open combat gives you, well, combat points. These aren't important at all, but they do add up to award you with money upon completing a mission. For the first time in the series, you can use money to buy stuff. The Paladin, your high-tech fortress in the sky, can be upgraded to provide you with bonuses during gameplay. For example, you have access to a radar that marks enemies and collectibles automatically, and you can upgrade its range. Or you can upgrade the plane's infirmary to boost Sam's regenerating health in-game. Not sure how that works in real life, but whatever. Most importantly, and that's something easy to miss, upgrading the plane increases the 4th echelon multiplier that basically gives you even more money on your future missions. Other than the Paladin, you can buy and upgrade new weapons and gadgets, buy better suits for Sam to boost his armor or stealth, and improve your goggles design to give them better imaging resolution, increased range, a footprint tracker, etc. What's annoying about this system is that you can't buy the stuff you want outright. You need to buy every item on the list in a serial fashion. Like, I want the $100,000 gloves that magically make my aim better. Why do I have to waste money on gloves that I don't want, since they are worse than the ones I want to buy? That's not a problem though. By the 50% completion mark, you will have already unlocked the best upgrades and guns, and since you can replay past missions at any time, you can finish the first one, replay it a handful of times to farm money, and play the second mission with ridiculously overpowered gear. The game, when it comes to the gameplay, is way better than its predecessor. If you play on realistic difficulty like I did, you will find that the balance between challenge and fun is satisfactory. Now, that still doesn't mean that Blacklist can hold a candle to the first Splinter Cell games. However, I regard Blacklist to be in the same league as Conviction, and should be judged differently. Truth be told, it's a much more competent stealth game. While on the surface it will seem that Blacklist relies on a binary light-dark system, that's not 100% true. The lights on Sam's suit may light up to indicate that he is hidden in darkness, but enemies can still spot him, even if they are 6 or 8 feet away from him. Since combat is heavily discouraged and on higher difficulties, death is only 2 or 3 bullets away, staying hidden is paramount. That being said, however, your upgraded gear can make the game feel way too easy. The suits that increase your stealth make your footsteps quiet, and somehow make the enemies not as observant. What's the difference between this black suit and this black suit? Well, the latter makes you harder to spot. Really now? Not only that, but more expensive suits give you even more ammo and gadgets. They are limited, sure, but you can restock during missions, and so the player becomes incredibly overpowered. Blacklist has taken a lot of steps towards the right direction, but it is fair to say that it didn't take a few things into consideration. You might find the game to be way too challenging for your liking, but I found that even the hardest difficulty was a bit too easy, unless I purposefully handicap myself by breaking the worst gear into a mission. I place it way above the previous game, but like I said, it's still not a perfect game. Besides the single player campaign, which will take you some 8 hours to complete, there's co-op and Spies vs Mercenaries multiplayer. Let's tackle the co-op first. It's not a dedicated campaign with its own separate story, but instead, if you are bored of the main campaign, you can talk to one of your teammates and they will tell you about the stuff they are working on. But it can be somewhat immersion breaking at times. My gods, the engineers are going to launch an attack in 2 hours and we don't know where. Hey Anna, I've got 5 minutes. Do you want to fly over to Afghanistan and take out some weapon smugglers? It's silly, but what can we do? Each of your friends has about 3 or 4 missions, and each will take you to unique maps to perform some simple tasks. One player plays as Sam and the other as Briggs. It's pretty basic stuff. You can mark and execute targets together, take advantage of special co-op routes where one player will boost his body over a wall, and if one player is downed, his buddy needs to go rescue him before it's game over. Some of these missions you can even play solo if you can't get a friend to play with you or cannot find a teammate online. As far as multiplayer is concerned, this time around I've got footage to show you guys. This is the classic Spy vs Mercenaries mode that resembles the mode from Chaos Theory's multiplayer, where 2 enemies need to hack the terminals and the 2 mercs will need to stop them. My performance leaves a lot to be desired, but hopefully you can get the idea behind it. The other modes change the rules quite a bit, and you can pick a class or customize your own using the money you have amassed during the single player portion of the game. Sadly, I cannot show you any of these. You see, someone in the development team had the brilliant idea to tie your multiplayer level to your save game. If you start anew, you start at level 1. I know this because I played the shit out of the multiplayer mode when the game was first released in 2014. What's the problem, I hear you ask? Well, you need to be a specific level to play the vast majority of the modes on offer. But since I start at level 1 and the multiplayer is so dead, I can't play the modes I want. Basically, I'm locked out until I can reach the required level, and that entails a lot of waiting around in empty lobbies until someone decides to play the game. Well, the fact that no one's playing kinda makes my point moot, but I feel like the developers' plan to keep noobs out of the more complicated modes before they gain some experience backfired spectacularly. This brings us smoothly to the end of this presentation. Splinter Cell Blacklist is not a horrible game, far from it. But it's not exceptional either. The game was reviewed well by the gaming press, but it didn't do well sales-wise, and it's not hard to theorize why. Fans of the series were bummed off by Conviction, and the studio's decision to recast Sam Fisher and give the legendary Michael Ironside the boot didn't help things in the slightest. It's a damn shame the narrative arcs in the games never concluded, as it would seem that they never will. Blacklist underperformed, and Ubisoft has not shown any signs of returning to the franchise. It's not entirely unlikely we'll get a reboot in the future, but if you ask me, that's not happening anytime soon. Ubisoft has their hands full with Rainbow Six Siege, which proved to be a tremendous success despite its rocky launch, and in between them working to add servers to their multiplayer game and reviving franchises that they've been teasing for ages, there doesn't seem to be any room for cool old Sam Fisher. I would like to take this moment to thank each and every one of you who watched this video, and especially the ones among you who stuck with me for both parts of this video. I would then ask a random stranger to give me 5 minutes of their time, but you gave me nearly 3 hours of yours, and I cannot thank you enough. This video took a stupidly long time to produce, and shortly after I began creating it, my graphics card died. Having to then rely on a Radeon HD 4890 to capture footage and edit video proved to be, well, I'd say a challenge, but it felt more like torture. Part 2 was produced after I found a more competent replacement. That's why the production values are far better. If you liked what you saw and like the way I constantly mispronounce stuff, feel free to subscribe as I've got more videos like this in store, most likely smaller in scope because holy hell this script exploded so fast. I would also advise you to click the little bell icon to get notifications every time I upload. I personally find it extremely useful for channels that don't upload as regularly or consistently as others. And again, thank you very much. I have no name, but I might come up with one in the next video. Cheers. But do you know what the worst part of all these games is? Like, do you see how Sam Fisher just likes to roll on the ground even though he has a gun on his back? Like, do you know how hard it is to roll on the ground in the first place? And then you have a metallic rifle strapped to your back and you expect to roll and just be okay with it? No, well, the fucking thing hurts. How does he keep doing that? How? This is never explained in any of the canonical material, in any of the comics, in any of the video games. Fuck this shit, this is literally unplayable. No, just no, you cannot survive, your back cannot survive this. No, fuck this, no, fuck this. I'm not down with that, no, fuck that.